The sky darkened ominously over the small coastal town of Havenport, the promise of a storm looming as gusts of wind rattled the wooden shutters of homes and businesses. It was in this town that Jane Martins found herself at the end of her rope. A single mother to her 10-year-old son, Ben, she had spent the last 6 months desperately searching for steady work after the textile factory closed, leaving half the town unemployed. Jane sat in her kitchen, her hands trembling as she stared at the nearly empty pantry. A single loaf of bread, a can of beans, and half a carton of milk were all that stood between her and the gnawing reality of hunger. "Oh God," Jane said, "how are we going to survive with what is left? We only have a loaf of bread, a can of beans, and half a carton of milk in this pantry. How are we going to live after we finish eating them? God, I need your help urgently. Who do I call to ask for help? What am I going to do now?" "Mom," Ben's small voice called from the doorway, breaking her thoughts. "Can we read together?" Jane smiled faintly, trying to mask her despair. "Of course, sweetheart. Give me a minute and I will join you. What do you want to read?" Ben's eyes lit up as he flipped through the thin pages. "I found a verse today in Philippians. It says, 'And my God will meet all your needs according to the riches of his glory in Christ Jesus.' What does that mean, Mom?" For a moment, Jane couldn't answer. How could she explain the depth of God's provision when she felt so empty? She hugged him tightly, his innocent faith warming her heart. "It means we can trust God to take care of us, no matter what." Ben grinned. "So, he'll help us get more food?" "Yes, Ben," Jane replied, though her voice wavered. "He will." That night, as the storm roared outside, Jane knelt by her bed, pouring her heart out to God. "Lord, I don't know how we're going to make it," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I've tried everything, applications, odd jobs, even selling what little we have left. But we're at the end of our resources. Please, Lord, show me how to trust you like Ben does." The Bible said in Psalm 23, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." Lord, you are our shepherd in this home. Please provide for us. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving the town washed clean. Jane bundled Ben up for school, placing a thin sandwich in his lunch bag and praying he wouldn't notice how small it was. She walked him to the bus stop. When she returned, her neighbor, Mrs. Bennett, an elderly woman, came to her doorstep holding a package wrapped in brown paper. "I made too much bread yesterday and thought you might like some." Jane blinked, surprised. "Oh, Mrs. Bennett, thank you. I don't know what to say." "Just say you'll eat it," the woman chuckled, pressing the warm loaf into Jane's hands. As Jane held the package in her hands, she felt a flicker of hope. Maybe God was listening after all. The following week, Jane took a walk along the docks, hoping the sea air would clear her mind. Fishermen bustled about, unloading their catch and shouting greetings to one another. Among them stood a man she didn't recognize, his clothes travel-worn but his demeanor calm and confident. "Good morning, the stranger said, tipping his hat. "You wouldn't happen to know where I can find a bite to eat, would you?" Jane hesitated. She didn't have much, but something about his kind eyes stirred her. "I don't have much to offer, but you're welcome to join me for lunch." The man smiled. "Thank you. That's very generous." Over the humble meal of bread and beans, the stranger introduced himself as Samuel, a traveling preacher. He spoke of his journeys and the countless ways God had provided for him. "Sometimes it's through the most unexpected people," he said, his eyes twinkling. As they talked, Jane shared her struggles, her voice trembling as she confessed her fears. Samuel listened intently, then leaned forward. "Jane, God sees your need and is already working on your behalf. Philippians 4 verse 19 isn't just words on a page, it's a promise." "But how?" Jane asked. "I've prayed and prayed, but I don't see any way out." Samuel's smile was gentle. "Sometimes, we have to trust that the seed is growing, even when it's still underground." A few days later, Jane received a call from a local bakery looking for part-time help. The hours were long and the pay modest, but it was a start. Grateful, she threw herself into the work, often returning home exhausted but thankful for the income. One evening, as she was closing up, the owner, Mr. Parker, approached her. "Jane, you're a hard worker. and I appreciate that. I've been looking to expand the business, and I need someone I can trust. How would you feel about managing the bakery? Jane stared at him, stunned. Me? A manager? I don't know anything about running a business. You've got the heart for it, Mr. Parker said. And I'll teach you the rest. Think about it. That night, Jane prayed with more fervor than ever. Lord, is this your answer? I'm scared, but I want to trust you. As Jane stepped into her new role, she discovered talents she didn't know she had. She learned to balance accounts, manage inventory, and even create new recipes that drew customers from neighboring towns. Slowly but surely, her financial situation improved. One afternoon, while cleaning out an old storage room, Jane found a dusty ledger filled with the bakery's history. Tucked inside was a letter from the original owner, a devout Christian who had dedicated the business to serving God's purposes. The letter read, "This bakery exists to bless those in need. May it always be a testament to God's faithfulness." Tears filled Jane's eyes as she realized she was part of a legacy far greater than herself. Months later, on a sunny Sunday morning, Jane stood before her church, sharing her testimony. "There were times I didn't know how we'd make it," she said, her voice steady. "But God showed me that His provision isn't always immediate or obvious. Sometimes, it's a loaf of bread from a neighbor. Sometimes, it's a stranger reminding you of God's promises. And sometimes, it's the courage to step into an opportunity you feel unqualified for." She held up her Bible, open to Philippians 4 verse 19. "This verse has become my lifeline. It's not just a promise, it's the truth. God really does supply all our needs according to His riches in glory." The congregation erupted into applause, moved by her story of faith and resilience. As Jane walked home with Ben, he looked up at her, his eyes shining. "See, Mom, I told you God would take care of us." She laughed, pulling him close. "You were right, Ben. He always does." As Jane and Ben walked hand in hand through the sunny streets of Havenport, their story echoed a profound truth: God's provision is never late. It comes in ways we often don't expect, but always at the right time. Whether through a loaf of bread, an unexpected opportunity, or the quiet assurance that He sees our struggles, His promise in Philippians 4 verse 19 remains unshaken, "And my God will meet all your needs according to the riches of His glory in Christ Jesus." At Musings of the Spirit TV, we aim to bring stories like Jane's to life, showing how God's hand moves in both big and small ways. Let Jane's journey remind you that no matter your challenge, God's provision is just around the corner. If this story touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Like this video to let us know you enjoyed it. Subscribe to Musings of the Spirit TV for more inspiring stories brought to life through animation. Comment below with a moment when you saw God's provision in your own life. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to share this video with friends and family who might need a reminder of God's faithfulness. Remember, the same God who provided for Jane is the God who provides for you. Stay hopeful, stay prayerful, and we'll see you in the next story. God bless.